I have a question for you. Why doesn't this airport become a mega hub for all passenger travel between Asia and North America? I am of course talking about Ted Stevens International Airport, which you can see pictured here in all its huge glory. Look at the size of those runways, the gigantic taxiways, and the capacity to be a huge cargo hub. This airport is the third most busiest cargo airport in the entire world, and for good reason. If you're getting a package shipped anywhere from Europe to Asia to North America, very likely it goes through Alaska, and for good reason. Look at these travel times. Like if you're trying to fly from Anchorage to say Hawaii, it's only 5 hours. Or if you wanted to go Anchorage to London, it's only 8.5 hours. Like the range of destinations really is quite ludicrous. And that got me thinking, if this is one of the world's best cargo airports, then why isn't it one of the world's best passenger airports? And of course, Alaska in the past was also a huge hub for passenger travel when Russian airspace was closed. Flights coming from Europe couldn't fly through the USSR airspace, so they had to land at Alaska to refuel before continuing on to North America. Today we have jets that have enough fuel to fly around Russia, or during better times they can fly straight through it, so Alaska lost relevancy. But just like winter, I think its time in the dark is coming to an end, and we could see it as an amazing hub airport. Let me explain. Let's take Dubai for example. Emirates runs their airline out of Dubai, where they fly to a huge range of destinations around the world with their gigantic aircraft. And this is everything from North America, Europe and Asia. However, Dubai is not as perfectly located as Anchorage is in Alaska. As you can see, these flights need to go all the way around the thickest part of the world to go between these countries. Now, whilst that's fantastic for the southern hemisphere, say for example Australia where I'm from, it's not ideal for passengers traveling between say Europe and North America. And this is where Alaska makes a lot more sense. I think that if you could imagine an airline, say something like Emirates based in Anchorage, it could fly between Singapore and New York City in a fantastic amount of time. Now, of course, Singapore Airlines already does this between Singapore and JFK, and the reason for this is that passengers don't want to change if they can help it. Passengers much prefer to fly directly from their home point to their destination without having to change. The only reason that we need to fly through Dubai, say on Emirates from Sydney to London right now, is because of the range of the aircraft. Something that Qantas is very quickly going to fix with their new Project Sunrise. So you're probably wondering to yourself, Nick, why would an airline be based in Alaska when these other airlines are doing direct flights? Well, they can save on cost because it will cost a lot less fuel to be much more competitive to larger airlines. And there is an example of this. Of course, we all remember the old Norwegian Air before COVID. They used to be based out of Gatwick and fly from Europe to North America through their hub airport in London. The advantage this airline had against incumbents like British Airways was they were much cheaper, using their fleet of Boeing 787s to fly very similar routes to British Airways, as well as the local London traffic. But because of the low cost of tickets, their fuel costs were a real biting edge into their business model. So to get around this, you would need to have a hub airport that is centrally located between as many destinations as possible that passengers can fly into, change planes, and then go on to their next destination. And that way you could have really low fares, like shockingly cheap fares, and still be very competitive against those more expensive direct flights because you need less fuel to do each leg. So this brings me back to my crazy fever dream about Alaska. I think a Norwegian style airline that has large planes like the 787s could operate a suite of very cheap routes through Alaska and keep costs incredibly low. Now, the huge disadvantage of this is that there's not much actually happening in Alaska. That's why we don't see many international flights going there at the moment. Actually, right now, Alaska only flies to Frankfurt and Vancouver, and the Frankfurt flights are seasonal. They're their only two international routes to Alaska. So you can see that this airline would need to change. However, I do know that they would get a fantastic deal to operate at the airport because it's something that the airport's really seeking, and because they're right next to all those rich oil fields, you know they'll get a killer deal on the oil. It's just a shame that they're not going to get some sort of government deal like the airlines of the Middle East do, which is kind of like, do they really pay for their petrol? Is that how Emirates has been so successful? But anyway, I'm going on a completely different topic there, so let's focus back on this. And you can see from the current flights that they have, Anchorage is set to explode if an airline decided to base there. And you're probably thinking, Nick, no airline's actually going to go to Alaska. You can imagine the costs and the infrastructure and getting it all set up. But there are several airlines already operating there. And I'm not just talking about Alaska, who is already flying there to Anchorage and it's one of their hub airports. I am, of course, talking about the cargo carriers. All of them. There are so many cargo carriers that are currently flying that theoretically they could start to operate passenger service. And you're thinking, Nick, they don't have passenger planes. Well, let me introduce you to the Combi aircraft, where they have cargo in the front and they have passengers sitting at the back. And because the cargo is already subsidizing the flights, the plane's going there anyway, the passenger fares would be incredibly cheap. So you've got these airlines like DHL and FedEx that have vast networks, vast fleets of planes. They just need to put seats in there, get some flight attendants, and of course pass all of the safety ratings that the FAA puts on them. But then bang, we have massively cheap travel that goes around the world with flight times that would be, I would suggest, competitive compared to, say, those direct flights to far more destinations. It could be a breeding ground, and they are really trying to push this. I'm not kidding. This may actually happen in our lifetimes. Anchorage is pushing for them to become a passenger airport. The idea is the larger planes, such as the Airbus A380 or the Boeing 777X, will fly from, say, Asia or Europe into Anchorage Airport, and then they will distribute on smaller 737s. And they give a very interesting example as to why this is the perfect case. Basically, right now, American Airlines as a whole don't really get a lot of the Indian traffic. The Indian subcontinent has a huge population of people that want to fly into North America. However, they're currently flying on Middle Eastern carriers to, say, Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and then flying onwards to American destinations such as New York before boarding smaller planes and then going to small cities. This is a very long trip, especially if they're going to the West Coast, and it's something that a hub in Alaska could change. Say, for example, a flight from Bangalore could fly into Anchorage, and then all of the passengers could be distributed onto small 737s or Airbus A320s. As you can see, the route maps are functionally identical if we zoom this in. You can see that it adds less than 1% to their actual flight. So basically, in the perfect world, wow, that coffee looks really delicious down there. So you can see that this adds only 1% to the actual flight time. So it would be something that passengers would actually find because their trip to the West Coast and other places would be quicker and cheaper than going through the Middle East. Passengers would perceivably save 2 hours of flight time, and the cargo rates would be very lucrative. I think it's something that a lot of airlines can't ignore. And I think it's a great investment opportunity for other people to jump into this if there was going to be, say, a new airline startup, which sounds like I'm about to start pitching you a crazy scheme that, like, hey guys, come in and invest in my airline that's going to be based in Alaska. But from what I've been saying, it really does make you think. So what do you think? Do you think that an airline based in Alaska could actually work? Let me know down in the comments.